Hello, Bitcoin Basics listeners. Thank you for joining us. So what we have here is a series that I did for a local radio station in New Zealand called Fix the Money, Fix the World. Some of you might recognize that phrase. And what I've done is just gone through basic highlights of what's happening in the economy and how it actually affects the everyday person. So we've just uploaded those to the Bitcoin Basics podcast. Thank you, Gordon, for doing that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
The following podcast is a live recording of a radio show first broadcast by FreshFM with assistance from New Zealand On Air.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Fix the Money, Fix the World with Faris Mali, coming to you on FreshFM Monday mornings at 11 a.m. So if you were with us last week, that was the precursor to today's episode, which is central bank digital currencies. We talked previously about what a central bank does, what its mandates are, and why would a central bank be introducing a digital currency. So their role is essentially to provide cash and liquidity into the system. And we had an announcement from the RBNZ that they were looking at a central bank digital currency. This follows on announcements from several countries around the world and even pilot projects where a central bank digital currency is actually being tried. The main country this is actually being tried is in China at the moment. So the yuan, which is yuan, that's their currency, the yuan, is something that they're actually trying. And they're running a pilot project in a certain part of China at the moment. Now, with China, what's actually happened in the last few years is if anyone's been to China, you'll know the majority of people there, 1.3 billion users actually in China, use what's called Alipay and WeChat. So Alipay is a mobile payment app that is owned and developed by Alibaba. And then WeChat, which is part of a whole nother ecosystem where WeChat is a mobile messaging service like WhatsApp, but it actually has a payment service attached to it. So what you can do is if you want to send someone some money, you don't need their bank account details. You just need their mobile phone number. And if they are on WeChat or Alipay, which the majority of people are, you just send them money from there. So this has actually taken a lot of business away from commercial banks in China. And the Central Bank of China is thinking, what can we do about this and how can we use it? So we looked at some of the benefits last week of why would you want a central bank digital currency? One of the things that it does is it makes taxation a lot easier. So let's say, for example, you are receiving a stipend or a payment from the government as it is. You could be a single parent. You could be receiving a housing allowance, anything like that. So that goes into a bank account. And the bank, obviously, the government needs your bank account details. You would have to, if you change bank accounts, you have to update them. There's that friction there where there's no relationship between you and the government when it comes to your finances. They go through a middle person being a private bank. So under this system is if you have a central bank digital currency, they would have an app similar to what I described before with WeChat, with WePay, Alipay and WeChat, and they could have their own app. And they would send this directly to your app. So if you're receiving $100 a week to assist with cost of living, we just saw here in New Zealand, these new cost of living adjustments come out. And you may have already received those payments if the Department of Internal Affairs already has your bank details, you probably received that payment automatically. It just came to your bank account. So something similar could be done with a central bank digital currency in that they could just send that to you. And then at the end of the year, they could just figure out how much taxes do you owe us and you pay us back. So that is the positive benefit of it is everything's a lot more transparent because in our previous episode, we talked about how cash is essentially what is used for nefarious purposes. It's what criminal elements use because you cannot track cash. It's very, very difficult and to keep track of where cash is going. Whereas if everything is on what's called a distributed ledger, so think of it as if you write something on a book and everyone can see that book like a ledger and it's online, everyone can see it, then you can't really hide things. You can't hide where the money's going. It's a lot easier to follow. especially if you're not moving it from one bank to another. It's just directly with you and the government. So those are the benefits in that it is a relationship with you and the government. Everything is a lot more transparent. You're removing cash from the system, which can be used for criminal purposes. And this is something that is being trialed at the moment. Now, it's not just China's doing this. The Federal Reserve this week, Federal Reserve America, actually announced they're trialing Fed Now in middle of 2023. So they're running their own pilot project called Fed Now, which is a similar thing, where essentially they are launching their own digital currency. Since we recorded this podcast, this episode last week, Starbucks actually announced that they were, and this in America, Starbucks was no longer going to be accepting cash. They're only going to accept credit cards or FPOS cards, not cash. So we are actually seeing a move privately and publicly for these banks to move away from a cash-based system. Even though cash use is on decline, fewer and fewer people use it. But what are some of the negative connotations of that? So let's just look at the Starbucks example. If other companies move to do that and they no longer accept cash, well, there's a lot of people in this world that don't have access to a bank account. They do not have a credit card or an FPOS card. You think of the homeless. They rely on cash. There's by the side of the road, some of them rely on those handouts to go and buy their groceries. Well, if the grocery store says we don't accept cash, what position does that leave them in? And it is a bit strange that a company can say we don't accept the currency that is provided by the government where we're located in. I don't think they actually have a legal standpoint to say we don't accept it. If someone were to legally argue the case, I think they'd win, but I'm not a lawyer. It's just my opinion. But it is strange that we are moving in this times where we're saying we don't want cash. We want everything to be digital, and central banks around the world are doing the same thing. So that is the positive aspect of it, in that a central bank can basically just issue their currency. And they don't have to sell bonds as much. They can just say, okay, they can do what's called essentially an airdrop. Okay, we had the COVID response, for example, and now we want everyone to receive $1,000 a month. And bang, it just goes into their account. And if they don't have everyone's bank account, but if they have this central bank digital currency, then bang, you just automatically get it. Then at the end of the year, if they no longer need that, say, yep, we're just going to open the economy back up, then that $1,000, well, we'll just put an end to that. So those are the benefits, but with that, there actually do come some potential hazards. So one is, we've talked about this previously, where governments actually want you to spend your money. They don't want you sitting on it. This is why inflation goes up and the value of your cash goes down, because your money is not designed as a savings unless you put it into a bank. And interest rates are very low at the moment that you're dissuaded from doing so. So your cash needs to be spent, but they can't force you to spend physical cash. However, let's say they put $1,000 into your federal central bank digital currency, and you have 6 months to spend it. And at the end of 6 months, that disappears or it's reduced. So they can actually do this because everything's controlled digitally. They can go, okay, you're not spending this money. If you don't by this time, we're going to take 10% off, or we're going to eliminate it altogether. This money has to be spent. It can't be saved. That is one potential where it is encouraging consumers and citizens to essentially spend their money and not sit on it. Because this was an unforeseen response to the 2008 financial crisis, was in America, especially the savings rate of Americans went up for the first time since World War II. So first time since World War II, Americans started saving money. And that the response to 2008, the quantitative easing response, was we need you to spend your money. And when you saved it, it proved us wrong, and we don't want that happening again. So that could be one of the effects. Another more draconian measure, which we have actually seen happen July this year in China. So in China, the COVID app over there, which many G8 countries had to download this COVID app, where when we were in lockdowns and we got out of lockdowns, we went into these other systems where to prove your status, you had to essentially scan in, and it showed that, yep, your vaccination status was up to date, so you could go to your restaurants, you could go to your movie cinemas, and you could participate in society normally. So the same thing was introduced in China, and they had a very simple one, where it was red or green. Red basically meant you either had tested positive or you were in proximity of someone who tested positive. And if you were red, you are not allowed entry into public transportation, medical facilities, and I think even some transport. You can go on buses and such. So you're very, very limited when you're on the red setting on your phone. There was a bank in China that lost about $4 or $5 billion of customer money. So this was customer funds that this bank actually lost, and they said to them, unfortunately, you're just not going to get your money back. And many people had their life savings in there. But I think about 1 million customers were affected by this. So some people traveled to the little city region where this bank was, and they just went there to protest. Now, the reports of protest was that it was peaceful. They simply stood out there with some signs, "Where's our money?" That was it. However, at the end of the day, what they found was when they went to go home, the app on their phone went from green to red. So the people that were involved in the protest, their app on their phone went red, even though they had not been in contact with someone who was COVID. They had not tested positive for COVID. Their phones, which are, remember, we've got GPS on these things, they were geo-tracked to this protest, and their phones all went to red. Some of these people couldn't get back home. When they did get home to discover their phones were red, then their family members, they turned red as well. So for a period of 7 or 10 days, they could not access, could not go to work, could not go to public transportation, could not access majority of their daily needs simply because they're involved in a peaceful protest. So this is where central bank digital currencies can become part of a social credit system. I'll talk about this a bit more in a second, but for now, I'll give my voice a rest, and we're going to have a song, and we are going to hear from Happier by Marshmello and Bastille. If you are just joining us, this is Fix the Money, Fix the World on FreshFM, and that was Happier by Marshmello and Bastille. And what we've been talking about today is central bank digital currencies. This is part 2 of our series. Part 1 we aired last week. And we've just been talking about what could be the negative implications of a central bank digital currency. And one of them is if it's tied into a social credit system. And I'll actually refer you to a really good episode of Black Mirror on Netflix. The episode is called Nosedive. And this, when it came out, was a potential dystopian future, the not too distant future, where what happens if everything we do is information that's collated to define who we are. So in this episode, this person, when you get in an Uber, you actually give the driver a rating. And that rating on Uber says if he gets 5 stars, then he's doing very well, and you are more likely to want to get a 5-star driver. Well, what happens if everything we do in life gives us stars as consumers? So not just the business that you run, but everything you do on a daily basis. If you don't tip someone enough, they could give you 2 stars. So this is where this episode went. And yes, that is a fictional show. But what we're actually seeing is what once was fiction in art eventually sometimes comes into play in life. Life sometimes imitates art. And we are seeing these social credit systems come about. Now, with this is the concern, is that if we have a central bank digital currency, and look, at the moment, it does not remove or negate the relationship you have with your bank. So your credit card, your debit card, your internet banking, all that stuff is between you and your bank. It's not between you and the government directly. A central bank digital currency might just have something to do with taxes and people who are relying on some form of payment from the bank itself. So let's just say if you are in that category where for now or in the future, you are dependent on payments from the bank. The central bank, the government. So when I say central bank, I'm referring to the government here. So let's say if you receive $1,000 a fortnight and they can determine, okay, the money that you're receiving, you're only allowed to spend it on rent and on groceries that we deem essential. You're not allowed to buy an alcohol or cigarettes. So with cash, they don't have that kind of control. So at the moment, you get $1,000 from the government, you can take out cash, and you can go do whatever you want with it. But say they're not happy with you, they deem you ill-equipped to handle your own life, and they want to control how you spend your money. So what they can do is basically decide that, yep, with this money we're giving you, it can only go to rent, or it can only go to certain groceries, but it cannot go into non-discretionary spending. So this is similar to what America does with food coupons. They don't give out cash sometimes to the people on welfare. They just give them food coupons. And that's what this could become, a digital food coupon where the money that's provided to you, for whatever reasons, they control how you spend it. Now, that may sound far-fetched, but it's not. And you may think, well, that doesn't affect me because I have money with my own bank. But we are starting to see instances creep up where like, okay, this is not just where banks could be heading, but maybe private companies as well. So there was a announcement that came out recently, and it was on the World Economic Forum, where a company in Sweden, and we actually referred to Sweden last week, where we talked about they're doing big strides in removing cash from their society. So a company in Sweden was launching a credit card. This credit card will track your carbon emissions. So I'm not talking about how many times you drive your car. It will actually track what are you buying. And it may determine that, hey, you've bought too much steak this week. So the next time you go and buy a steak, this card will decline that purchase. Or if you want to go to a restaurant, it's going to decline that purchase because you might buy a steak there. This is what this card will actually do, is limit what you are allowed to spend your money on. So at this moment, it seems like this card is just something you would have to apply for, but what if that is enforced? That is, a potential. So this would affect everyone and not just anyone who's dependent on a central bank or a government stipend. So again, I am playing devil's advocate here. We want to look at what the positives and negative implications are of a central bank digital currency. This is no central bank has actually said this is what they're going to do, but we just, as economists and as people where the decision that these economists and these forums make actually affect us, we kind of just want to be prepared, and we want to know, how do these decisions affect us in our everyday lives? So a lot of stuff would obviously apply to your domestic base. So if the RBNZ released a digital Kiwi, then it will only apply to people living in New Zealand. So anyone coming from overseas, they would have their Visa cards from their own country. It only applies here. The digital Kiwi would not affect them. They would just use their Visa cards, their credit cards, their postcards while they're here on tourist holidays. And the same thing, if you're going overseas and the Fed now is in America, doesn't affect you in any way. It's unlikely this would affect currency exchanges. Currency exchange is a big part of the financial system where people buy and sell currencies on a regular basis. I myself did actually have a full-time career as a currency trader on my own, and I don't see it affecting that as much, even though there's been a lot of changes to the industry. It's just one of the reasons I got out of it. It just became too difficult. So it is essentially a domestic policy that would affect its citizens. Now, I don't see a store of value in this. So we talked about bonds last week. Why would you want to buy and own this thing? There's no store of value there. One of the reasons it could be around or could have been introduced was in 2017, Bitcoin went on a huge appreciation in value. Went from about $1,000 to $20,000 in under 2 years. One of the key elements of that was the Chinese nationals who made a lot of money in China wanted to take their money out of China and invest it elsewhere. And Bitcoin proved the best way of doing that because they were limited into how many withdrawals they could make from their bank. And if you start closing all your bank accounts and moving money out, that would raise some flags. What are you doing? So countries don't like capital flights. They don't want money leaving their country. If you want to make money in a country, they want you to invest it there. So with Chinese nationals buying real estate in Australia, New Zealand, America, they had to get their money out, and buying Bitcoin in China and then withdrawing those Bitcoins overseas was the safest and fastest way for them to do that. And then it actually turned out that Chinese authorities ended up closing down a lot of exchanges, Bitcoin exchanges in China, even banning Bitcoin mining in China, which is something that a threat they make every year, actually. And then it kind of just ignores it and comes back. So a central bank digital currency would only affect the citizens of the country where that central bank is issuing said digital currency. It would be a centralized system, which means, and this is a concern from a privacy and security point of view. So everything that we do online today is data that can be hacked and stolen. And when you think about it, what you do on your phone, if someone gets access to that information or your computer, that says more about you than your CV or anything else. So this actually has happened where some central banks and employment agencies around the world have been hacked, and you'll be terrified to find out how often your information is hacked and sold. And I'll give a plug to the sponsor of the show. That's myprivacy.help, where if you go to that website, myprivacy.help, you'll actually see on there which companies have been hacked recently and what information was put out there. And governments have your full name, your date of birth, your address, your mobile phone number, absolutely everything related to who you are. So if they have a central bank digital currency where they have all those details and that is on an app, that can get hacked. And this stuff happens very easily. And we have had the Aadhaar system in India, which is a biometric, and PIN one in India, which actually has everyone's details there. That has been hacked several times. And I think not long ago was the Central Bank of Bangladesh. The central bank itself was hacked, and several millions of dollars was stolen from the central bank itself. I'll need to check that source. I think that is the Central Bank of Bangladesh. But anyways, the more of our lives that are digital and the more of them that go through a centralized system. So a central system means one company that has all your information, and that company makes itself a very big target. That is a very, very strong concern to your online privacy and security, because that stuff can get hacked. So if someone hacks into your wallet and goes and spends that money, then you need to prove that that wasn't you. And how do you get that money back? So these are some of the questions that we need to be asking ourselves when it comes to a central bank digital currency. What solutions does it actually solve versus what problems can it create? So this is where we are, central bank digital currencies. It is still early days. They are in pilot programs, and we will keep an eye on this story because it is one we expect to continue to develop. At the end of the day, how does this stuff affect you? And you might want to know how to fix you before it affects you, because by then it could be too late. Thank you very much for tuning in. And if you have any questions, comments, please go to farismali.com, FarisMali.com. And if there's any topics you want us to look at on Fix Some Money, please do so. Thank you for tuning in. And we're going to go out with one more song, and we are going to listen to How You Like Me Now by The Heavy.
The podcast you just listened to was a live recording of a radio show, first broadcast on FreshFM with support from New Zealand On Air. FreshFM is a community access media station based in Te Tauihu, the top of the South Island, New Zealand. The funding of Access Media makes these podcasts possible. To find similar programs by other community access media stations, go online to accessmedia.nz. If you or your group would like to know more about how you can have a program on our station, please contact us. Visit our website freshfm.net for our contact details.